welcome to my basement woodshed. Or living room. It is not just a great pleasure for me to introduce Charlie, but it's an honor as well. I don't want to go into his biographical background. You can do that very well on the internet. It's just really quite fascinating. All these Fox television programs that he's been on, and they're interesting. He evokes, even 2 years ago when he was 19, one of the other commentators observed as this young man was 19 going on 59, which was the perfect response to what it was he had just said. You have the opportunity, you could pick up some of that yourself. Charlie's a tremendous asset as God has brought him to this country, born here. I mean, it's from Chicago, and got him active to begin with all of this when he was 19. He's the old man of 21 at this point. And it is just a tremendous benefit to us, as you will see. What he has to say to you will be better than any introduction I or anybody else could possibly make. I know that when he's done, you will agree with what I just observed. So Charlie, it's yours, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. Let's give a round of applause to Tom and Paul for organizing this event, and Ray for letting us host it. It is wonderful to be with you tonight. Unfortunately, there was a big mix-up and my teleprompters didn't make it in time, so I won't be on my A game. I'm from Chicago, so when I speak at some functions on the South Side, they say, you don't want the teleprompters? You know, our president uses them. I say, I'm sorry, I speak from the heart and no one writes. You know, I don't think our president's a liar, just whoever writes his speeches is. You know, it's an honor to be with you tonight. Again, born and raised in Chicago. At 18 years old, I started to get involved locally in politics. I started to go to functions like this, and I started to ask for 3 minutes to speak about my generation and issues that were affecting us on a day-to-day basis. And I started to realize around the 4th or 5th time I would go to a precinct committee meeting or a county township dinner, I was the youngest person in the room by 60 years sometimes. I went to my party officials in Illinois, and I went to some of the think tank professionals. I said, could we get something started for young people? Can we get an initiative to get young people into the party, into the movement, engaged and organized? And I was cast away. They said, well, you know, we've tried that before. It really doesn't work. I said, hey, I'll champion it. I'll get it going. I'll organize it. I'll be the figurehead. And I was really not enthusiastically received. On June 5th of 2012, I decided I had enough dealing with the Republican Party apparatus of Illinois. Yes, there is one, but most of them are Democrats, but that's besides the point. And I said, I'm going to start my own organization, and I'm going to start my own movement based on 3 core ideas. Free markets, fiscal responsibility, and limited government, with a core purpose and a core belief that young people do not have to believe in big government liberalism and progressivism, that there is a segment of the population that inherently will embrace liberty and freedom, and that if we message these values correctly, we can win over a generation based on these ideas and re-enchant a segment of the American population that has been cast away, assaulted, and harmed by this president and this administration. I would argue, in the last 60 years. So on June 5th of 2012, I launched this organization with no money, no resources, and didn't really know anyone. I put all my graduation money into it to get our articles of incorporation, and I started going to every event I could to meet everyone that even wanted to talk to me. And step by step and day by day, growing things through Facebook and Twitter and pure grassroots support, we were able to start chapters and solicit enough funding, and within a year we were doing some very, very exciting things. And now 2.5 years later, we're on 700 campuses nationwide. Our Facebook page is reaching 27 million people a week, and this fall we will have registered to vote 25,000 young conservatives to vote in November. And to come out here to Kalispell again, I was here a year and a half ago to speak at the Lincoln Reagan Day dinner and the Pachyderm Club. Was anybody there? That was great, wonderful. It was a great event. It was graciously to come back. And you know, I get to hear a lot, I get to learn a lot. The last 30 days, I've been on over 100 college campuses nationwide. And I'm going to tell you what young people are thinking, my prediction of what they're going to do coming a week from Tuesday in the midterm elections, and even more importantly, what we need to do heading into 2015 and 2016. Because I don't want this just to be like Elks Club dinner where you hear this and walk away. I want this to be a call to action, where hopefully some of the experiences that I've had and things that I've learned can be translated into your activism and translated into your day-to-day life so that you can engage young people better, that you can start networks here in Montana so that we do not allow our youth to fall subject to the predatory aspects of liberalism and big government progressivism. So yes, I am from Chicago, and we have a saying there, you know, vote early and vote often, and we embrace it. My grandmother was a lifelong precinct committee woman, a Republican her whole life, organized Republicans in Chicago. Impossible, right? She almost got President Nixon elected until Richard Daley threw all the votes into the Chicago River to get Kennedy elected. That's the side story. Anyway, she passed away in 1999, and she's been voting Democrat ever since. In Chicago, we try to reach 3 different types of voters: Republicans, Democrats, and deceased. And the third is usually the toughest to engage, but for whatever reason, they vote in huge numbers for Democratic politicians. The corruption in Chicago, unfortunately, has been multiplied into the White House and into this administration. We like to joke, like, this is not that bad. We've been living through this for the last 20 years. But unfortunately, the Chicago thug mafiosa tactics have now personified into the people such as Eric Holder and President Obama and Lois Lerner, and it's the same type of intimidation, cheating, lying, stealing, corruption that this administration unfortunately is using to attack my generation. So I'm going to tell you a quick story that I think everyone will enjoy, and something that kind of a snapshot into some of the experiences that I get to have every day. So when I was at 19 years old, actually about a year ago and 2 months ago, it was near the September of last year, we decided we want to host a debate on the East Coast. So we were thinking, what's the most liberal school on the East Coast that we wouldn't get kicked out at, and that they'd actually allow us to have a debate? So Harvard never got back to us, and so we said, what other schools? So we looked up where Obama had some of his supposed degrees, and we said, hey, Columbia University, let's have it there. And so Columbia University is a really conservative school right now. Yeah, it's in the conservative bastion of Manhattan, New York. I say that facetiously, of course. And we set up a debate: the morality of capitalism versus socialism, which is the best direction for America to move forward. And we had 400 college students show up. And I was debating in favor of capitalism and free markets, and that economic freedom is a necessary prerequisite for the abolition of poverty and for the raising of all people. And my counterpart, nice gal, was arguing for socialism and big government liberalism, and really, as she said, really my argument can be summed up in a couple sentences. We need to overly tax the rich and punish business. I said, boy, this is easier than I thought. And so I slaughtered her, to say the least. Not, figuratively, not actually. And we took an exit poll, and 70% of the kids said that they thought I won the debate, and they agreed with my value system. Columbia University, mind you. Now, I went in there knowing I was probably going to win the debate. I have encounters like that all the time. I've always been an inkling towards combative discussion. But what I want you to take away from that is not the fact that we won the debate. Was that afterwards, I had 40 or 50 kids come up to me and they said, hey Charlie, who is that Adam Smith guy you kept on mentioning? Or can you tell me more about that Milton Friedman guy? And this is an Ivy League institution where kids are getting 34s and 35s and 36s on their ACTs. They're #1 in their high school classes. The best and brightest that this country has to offer do not know the beauty of the free market. They didn't know Adam Smith from F.A. Hayek. They couldn't tell you Thomas Paine from Thomas Jefferson. And it wasn't even antagonism. Instead, it was curiosity that I sparked into the minds of 400 supposed left-leaning college students in the bastion of Columbia University. And these dialogues and these discussions I had, I was there for 2 hours afterwards, and I talked to these kids, and it just hit me. I said, this is why I'm fighting. This is why we're starting groups and chapters all across the country. Because we as conservatives, a lot of the time we like to believe, you know, we have found every conservative in the country and there's no hope and the demographics are working against us and the youth are all liberal and we're going to lose forever. And I know that we don't say it, but I hear that a lot. I hear it from a lot of people, there is no hope. How many times have people heard that said in the last 2 years, right? And what I saw at Columbia University was more than hope. It was a direction that we can take. And it is an opportunity, because I truly believe there are tens of millions of young people that would agree and align with our value system if we just messaged and reached out to them. So the really fun thing happened the next day. My very good friend Brett, who I grew up with, helped set up the debate. Now, Brett came up to me afterwards and he said, "Hey Charlie, you know, you kind of like politics, right?" I said, "Yeah, I dabble in politics." And he said, "How would you like to sit in a political science course tomorrow?" I said, "Sure, that would be fun." He said, "All right, but just don't say anything, you know, just keep your mouth shut, just keep to yourself and just," I said, "Yeah, sure, that should be fine." So I walk into the lecture hall the next day, and it's about 350 freshmen in an introductory to political science course. And I sit in the back row of the big lecture hall, and in walks the professor. Hair down to his knees, double earrings, tie-dye shirt. He's got that kind of like liberal goatee thing that a lot of those people on MSNBC have. You know, kind of know what I'm talking about. The liberal battle with facial hair is unbelievable. Anyway, he gets up to the front of the class, and he starts the usual pontification that you would expect from a professor in front of a liberal, in a liberal university in a freshman syllabus class, but nothing too controversial. I wanted to keep my word to Brett. So, but 15 minutes in, I was at pure conflict with myself. He said out of nowhere, "And those evil capitalists stealing all of our money." And 7 rows in front of me, Brett turned around and said, "Don't say anything." So I had to make a judgment. I said, am I going to jeopardize my friendship with Brett, or am I going to stand for what I believe in? So it took me about half a second, and I stood up and challenged accredited, doctored, tenured Ivy League professor. Now mind you, at the time I was 19 years old. And here I was, a non-student without a college degree, when the history of my economic literacy is reading Wealth of Nations and Milton Friedman's Free to Choose, against a guy that's been studying economics for 40 years. Fair fight, if you ask me. For the entire class, for 45 minutes, I engaged this professor and I challenged him and I questioned him and I pushed him on free market economics, on what it means to be an entrepreneur in the modern economy, how you can never plan human decisions, how no matter you try to manipulate the currency or try to pass laws with great intentions, you can never ever dictate the choices of human beings. And it all came down to one core premise, is that he truly believed he was smart enough, and the colleagues of him at Columbia University that he were around, he believed they were smart enough to control the American economy. And that's really what the liberals believe. It is an unbelievable self-righteous that they have, that they think they can control the decisions of everyday Americans. And it boiled down, and for 45 minutes went back and forth and back and forth. And he was never challenged before. You could tell. You could tell that I took him completely off guard, in ambush, if you will. And then the period concluded. And again, afterwards, I had kids come up to me, and this time they said, "Thank you for doing that." I said, you know, he always intimidated me. He was always very loud. He was always very assertive in his beliefs, but I never knew how to articulate free market capitalism the way that you did. So thank you. And I had other kids come up to me, a kid from San Antonio that I stay in touch with, his name is Carlos. And he said, "My dad owns a small business in San Antonio. I worked my way through high school, I got straight A's, I always wanted to go to Columbia. And whenever he bashed capitalism and free markets, he was bashing my dad. And thank you for doing that." And story after story after story in a university where we think they're all lost, where we just label them. And then I say most conservatives, "Oh, those crazy schools." I mean, I hear what UC Berkeley, or people say it about the University of Montana sometimes. I hear that's a liberal school. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know. You guys can fill me in with that. And then I proceed to the front of the lecture hall to exit, and the professor makes a beeline to me and says, "Do you go to school here?" I said, "I gotta go." But the point of that story is quite simple, and it is outreach. It is talking to people that don't think like us, people that don't look like us, people that have never heard the message of free market economics, unlimited government, and constitutional liberty. And that is exactly what our organization is doing every day. Now on 700 campuses nationwide for the last 10 weeks since school started, we've identified hundreds of thousands of like-minded kids of the conservative, free market, limited government, conservative bent. And they want to make a difference. They're activists. They're tired of government telling them how to live their life. And they're tired of being forced for things that they will not benefit from. Even with that being said, the majority of youth will self-describe as liberal. They will self-describe as a Democrat. But I learned something this fall that I never thought I would come to the conclusion of. In 100 different campuses in the last 30 days. I pushed myself. I went campuses to North Carolina, to Texas, in Iowa, in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts, California. And I wasn't home very much, but I went to these campuses and I learned. And these kids that would say they were Democrats, these kids that would say they were liberal, when I broke it down to them, 70% of them said they were liberal because they wanted the government to leave them alone. And I said, excuse me? They said, yeah, the Republicans just want to tell me how to live my life. And so what we really have is not an ideological vacuum. We have a messaging problem. And we just do not brand our beliefs to these young people in a way that they can understand and relate. And when I heard that, I was not only taken back, I was hopeful and optimistic that we could reach this generation around these values. But we have to do it in ways that will be innovative and that will reach them in many different ways. I'll give you a quick story. A story about my neighbor, Caitlin. Caitlin is senior in high school, and she's 2 years younger than me, so this is a recent story. She hates politics. She always did. At least she did. But she loved Katy Perry. And she went to a Katy Perry concert one day. And outside of the Katy Perry concert, there was some booth handing out t-shirts in exchange for signing up emails. Like t-shirts for emails and t-shirts for emails. And so an inquisitive Caitlin walks up to the booth and she signs up an email and gets the shirt. And she looks at it. And it says, Obama for America stands with Katy Perry. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so she signs up, her email goes to the concert, goes home. The next day, she had a personalized email, not a mass email like a newsletter, a personalized email from a Obama for America community organizer saying, hey, Caitlin, we're offering some internship and paid opportunities for organizing for action. How would you like to get involved? How would you like to, be interested? Unfortunately, Caitlin was very susceptible. And she wanted to get some credit, she wanted to make some supplemental income, and she responded to the email. And she started to join their network. And she started to be interested in what Organizing for Action was doing. And she really didn't enjoy politics, but for whatever reason, she liked the idea of organizing people and being involved in a community. And so month after month, she started to gain up ranks in Organizing for Action. And this last summer, they flew her out to a special elite conference in California for the top Organizing for Action volunteers. And I hate to break it to you, but right now the #2 organizer for Organizing for Action in North Carolina that has registered and mobilized tens of thousands of young people is Caitlin. And they found her at a Katy Perry concert, just going to enjoy a singer. And now they have her in their network, recruited using that kind of medium. Now why do I tell you that story? It's because we refuse to do that kind of outreach, and we refuse to go to places that are people that we think we could win over, whether it's a country music concert, whether it's an immigration ceremony, which segues to my next story. When I was a senior in high school, I grew up in a high school that was 53% Hispanic. 53% of the high school was ESL, English as a second language. I grew up around many people that were Hispanic in their upbringing. A good friend of mine named was Caesar. Caesar was always, I considered, a conservative kid. Hardworking, pro-marriage, pro-life, pro-entrepreneurship, had a direction in his life. The senior year of high school, in March of 2012, he came up to me and said, hey Charlie, I'm becoming a legal citizen next week. It's great, we got all our paperwork, we filed it, our family came here legally, we believe in the process, so we're gonna become legal American citizens. I said, that's great, Caesar, congratulations, and we kind of lost touch for a couple weeks. A couple weeks later, I saw him walking down the hall in high school. And I just, it's in the corner of my eye, and sometimes you recognize logos, and you recognize words, and it just really turns your attention. And I saw him, and as he came closer to me, he was wearing a MoveOn.org shirt. And I darted up to him, I said, Caesar, what's up with your shirt? He's like, hey Charlie, how was your spring break? I said, yeah, what's with the shirt? And he said, oh, well, as you know, I just became U.S. citizen. I told you a couple weeks ago. I said, yeah, okay. So, well, after we got sworn in, there was a big booth and a celebration, and all these people and these vendors. And This guy came up to us, he spoke fluent Spanish. And he was from my native country, Honduras, and he said, in my native language, he said, hey, I would love to help your family out, get some extra food and some income. Let me tell you about this organization called MoveOn.org. And unfortunately, they had a long conversation, and within 2 weeks, in exchange for knocking on doors and phone banking, MoveOn.org would bring 3 meals a week to Caesar's family. And those 3 meals made a big difference to him. And Caesar and his family were making phone calls and getting other people involved in progressive values. And it was all because they were there at the immigration ceremony. Now, I don't tell you those 2 stories to scare you, but it should. I tell you rather as a call to action, because there is still a belief amongst many Republican circles and conservative circles that if we run better TV ads and we just stay within the margins, we're going to win elections. And I'll tell you what, if we do not drastically change and radically alter the way that we do messaging and campaigns, you will see President Clinton in 2016. I will give you 3 reasons right now why you should all be scared to death of the prospect of a Hillary Clinton nominee. I'll give you 3 reasons, and anyone can disagree with these, but they'll be very tough to. Number 1, Hillary Clinton has already built a machine on college campuses nationwide. I was at Texas A&M University, where they say howdy when you walk on, and half the kids are wearing military uniforms, and you'd think it would be a very conservative school. I saw 8 full-time staffers. They weren't working for Wendy Davis. They weren't working for the Texas Democratic Party. They were working for an organization called Ready for Hillary. Recruiting susceptible young women to get into their database, to start building an army of activists to help Hillary Clinton become the next president. I was at Iowa State University. I learned they already had an accredited chapter with 200 members called Ready for Hillary. Ladies and gentlemen, the machine is already being revved up. In 14 days or less, we will know who controls the United States Senate. We will know the direction. Steve Daines is going to win. It's great. But we're going to have an insurmountable beast in front of us that was started to be built in the summer of 2007 when Barack Obama started to get momentum. Hillary Clinton did not stop. The grassroots machine has learned their mistakes from 2008. That's the first reason. The second reason is the glass ceiling effect. There are many young women and women all across the country that will vote for a candidate just because they want to see her to be the first woman president of the United States. And I'll tell you, if you think that's not a factor, I could tell you anecdote after anecdote, I could show you poll after poll. Our generation is a very sensationalist generation. I talk to many, many students and I say, why did you vote for Obama? And they say, I thought I was part of something to put the first of something into the White House, the first black guy. I was part of eradicating the perils of racial divide. I was like, that's a bunch of nonsense, but whatever. And the same kind of rhetoric is going to be used in 2016. The same people are going to come out of the cracks. The same people who really have no idea what they're doing. You know, sometimes I like to say, can you just leave the voting to us? Like, we know what we're doing, you know? And I say that to many of these, you know, less informed young people. Like, can you just let us do the voting? Yeah, low information voters. So Waters' world at times is unfortunately the optimal. Like, they're on the higher end of some of these people I deal with. That being said, we still have an opportunity. The third reason why you should be very scared of Hillary Clinton, and it's more of a policy-specific argument, and it's something I hope that you demand answers from your legislators and from people in conservative policy circles. Hillary Clinton's going to run on a 4-pillar issue, and one of it's going to be women's rights, one's going to be economic equality, and there's a third one probably that's going to be, you know, draw back the presence of the United States in the world. The fourth one is the one that interests me, and I know this because I have people that have been on the left, and I can just see it coming. And the fourth one is going to be something no one could probably even predict: student loan forgiveness. Ladies and gentlemen,
It's already here.
No, it's not, unfortunately, not in the way she's going to do it.
Okay.
The average student loan debt in this country is $32,000. $32,000. The Democrats have been very smart, and anyone here can disagree with me, but I challenge you to do so. I'm very cynical in this way. The Democrats have wanted my generation to get into debt. They have designed it. They wanted our generation to take out money we didn't have to go find jobs that don't exist. It's that simple. They wanted us to become dependent on the federal government. They knew, as a nuclear option, that at any time they could say 3 words, or not 3 words, or a sentence: I will forgive your student loan. And they know as soon as they say that sentence, they don't even have to deliver it, they will get 70 and 80% of young people to vote for them. We did a small poll on a couple campuses, on 10 campuses nationwide, and we said, would you support a presidential candidate that would support student loan forgiveness? And we asked them for their party affiliation. 78% of kids that identified as Republicans said they would vote for them no matter the party affiliation. Hillary Clinton will run on student loan forgiveness. She will make it a pillar of her campaign. She will go to Ohio State University. She will go to the University of Miami. She will go to UNC Chapel Hill. She will go to these battleground states and the colleges, and she will promise the world. And she will say, I'll forgive your student loans. I want to give you a fair shot at life. It wasn't fair the way that you got into debt. Now, I will argue, and I'll make a compelling argument, they're in debt because of the federal government. They're in debt because of the overreach of the Department of Education. They're in debt because of lack of competition. Too many kids are going to college. Too many are failing out. No one is learning. Everyone's just getting accredited. And you know, the scarier thing that I shared last night at dinner was that out of the people that have more than $20,000 in student loans, and this is something that's not shared, 40% of them do not have a degree. They dropped out of school. They dropped out of school. And I like to say we have a generation in financial purgatory. Truly. They don't know, they have no direction, they have an unbelievable amount of student loan, they don't have a degree, so they can't go find a well-paying job, and if they did have a degree, they couldn't find a well-paying job. And they're kind of stuck in the middle. So what are they going to look for? They're going to look for a bailout. The same way that General Motors look for a bailout, the same way that the big banks look for the bailout, the same way that the insurance companies with Obamacare are going to look for a bailout, the students are going to vote and support for a bailout. So all I'm saying is I don't have the answer, but we have to start to demand a conservative answer to student loan forgiveness, one that can win over young people, one that can get other people that actually have made the right financial decisions to support it, because you are going to see a grassroots momentum behind that one single issue that could only be similar to something in the civil rights movement in the 60s. Because there has never been a more personally indebted generation in American history than we have right now. Ever. Like, not even close. I mean, in proportion to past, the closest was maybe in the 1950s when people took out some loans to go buy houses in the baby boom. And it was like $1,000 to $2,000 in personal debt compared to what we have now where it's $32,000. And that's adjusted for inflation. We have to watch out for it. I'm going to talk 5 minutes more and kind of sum it all up, and then I'd like to open it up for questions and really begin this dialogue. Who remembers the first presidential debate, Mitt Romney versus President Obama? Wasn't that a great night? He just kicked his tail and he blamed on the elevation. It was wonderful. It was great. Here's the untold story of that night that I want to share with you. It's documented in David Plouffe's book. It's been documented and verified by Valerie Jarrett. And it's something that people do not talk about very often, and they don't want to talk about. After Mitt Romney totally slaughtered Barack Obama, Barack ran off the stage, embarrassed, humiliated. He knew he lost. He knew he was going to take a dip in the polls. Valerie Jarrett, David Plouffe, and David Axelrod were sitting around a stand-up table, and they were talking, and Barack comes up, and Barack is upset beyond belief. And they say, Mr. President interrupts him, and he slams his hand down on the table. And he says, Valerie, get me on a college campus tomorrow. And she said, well, Mr. President, we have all these fundraisers. He said, no. I'm going to take a hit in the polls. I need to get on a college campus tomorrow. And she said, all right, fine, done. All right. The next day, this is documented. You can look it up. I encourage you to do so. He went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and 72,000 young people showed up in support of the president. It saved his campaign. He went to the Ohio State University the day after, 45,000 young people. University of Miami, 60,000 young people. When Barack Obama needed a bailout, when everyone was turning the back on the president, where did he go? He went to my generation. The power of the youth, when properly utilized, is something that can put anyone into office and can bail anyone out. And when Barack Obama really needed to get a boost in the polls, he went to my generation and reinvigorated him and promised the world, and delivered nothing. I have a saying that I like to use. It is quite simple. A young person voting for a Democrat is like a chicken voting for Colonel Sanders. Their decision is kind of in the fate of it, if you will. When a young person supports a Democratic politician, they are siphoning off their future. We have an administration during the Obamacare rollout that 127 times David Axelrod went on cable television and said the following quote, and I'm paraphrasing. He said, as long as enough young people sign up and pay more than they have to, this law will work. They are unapologetic in their zeal to get my generation indebted and dependent. The reason why politicians can use us, our generation of millennials, as a proxy is because we can get excited about a candidate in a short period of time, but we are really bad at holding that person accountable. And we're really bad at demanding that politician to do things that would benefit our generation. We are caught up in oration and narration of a very linguistic, as we like to say, charismatic speaker. Even though, side note, I don't think Obama's that charismatic anymore. Maybe it's the teleprompters, maybe it's, I don't know, the scandals. I just think he's totally lost it. Anyway, that's a tangent. Going back to the core, our generation, when they support these big government policies, is literally siphoning off our future, which presents an opportunity for us. And in 15 and 16, we are going to see a generation that is the most politically independent generation, that is the most ripe to win generation in the history of modern American politics. I like to call it the boomerang effect. Never before in American history have we seen a generation willingly siphon off their freedom to another politician and have it come back to us in such a full-forced manner. Let's think about it. The very segment of the population that thought was going to benefit from this president are now having to pay for the policies that they thought they were going to benefit from. African American communities, young people, minorities, and single women. Those are the people that are suffering under this president. It is middle-class Americans that are just trying to get by, that are getting squeezed by this administration, by politicians that are serving their own self-interest instead of the interest of them. And I'll tell you what, if we engage and we empower and we reach into students all across the country, we can see a grassroots momentum unlike anything this country has ever seen. Because when you really boil it down, young people today believe in freedom, they believe in liberty, they want to be left alone, and they want to have a more prosperous future. And I see it happen every day. They are looking for an alternative. And if we don't give them one, we will lose the greatest political opportunity in American history. Let's seize it. Let's make this opportunity not just an opportunity, but a result. And we will see those results in 16 and 18 and 20 and beyond. Thank you so much.
Any questions
I hope we do.
that have been spurred on? One of my questions is, what are we doing about all the campuses in the state of Montana? Have you got anything going in Montana?
Absolutely. So thanks to the generous support of some people in Montana, we were able to launch a wonderful program this fall where we had Carroll College, Montana State University, and University of Montana, where we were registering hundreds of young people, identifying thousands of conservatives on those campuses at all three of those schools, and it's going to pay dividends in the results coming this November. It was part of our 10-week program. We were able to give them materials like this, which was a big hit. And there's many more in the back I encourage you to look at. And we had wonderful success here in Montana. I went to an individual who remained nameless back in May, and I said, hey, we have gotten funding for Texas and Illinois, and there's so much enthusiasm. And this individual said, well, what will it take to get it here in Montana? And I just put together a proposal and done. And we want to do what we want to do in 15 is a very, very simple goal. Get a Turning Point USA chapter on every college campus in Montana. Usually if I said that state by state, it would be really, 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 really tough. Like Ohio has 185 schools. We've got 11 colleges here in Montana. It's doable. And we have a proposal in the back if you'd be interested in looking through it and potentially supporting it. And we want to grow and make this state a backbone of our operation. There are thousands of unidentified conservatives in this state that just go glossed over. I was on the ground at Montana State University in Bozeman, and there were hundreds of kids that were like, oh yeah, you know, I agree with all this. I'm not even registered to vote. I can't stand this president. I love that guy Steve Daines. I'd love to vote. You know, I believe in free markets. I want a better future. Millions of kids like that all across the country, and we can make Montana a vibrant hub of that kind of activism. So, great question.
Thank you. Next question.
Charlie, how can, I know you have the handout material tonight, and we'd like to raise some money for you. How do we do that?
Sure. He asked, how do you raise some money for us? Well, the first thing I should add is we are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization. So as I tell all of our donors, you can either give it to the federal government or you can give it to us. It's that simple. And as I always like to say, we have all the money we need. The problem is it's in your pockets. And it's tongue-in-cheek. I got that from a South Side minister in Chicago, by the way. And you should hear him say it. He delivered it with a lot more force. The way that you could support me, us as an organization, we have a little thing in the back you could pitch in. I don't know if we did a pass the hat thing someone mentioned. We might. If you're interested in giving, please talk to me. The last thing I would want to mention with that, there is an email sign-up card that everyone should have got. I encourage you to fill that out. You can learn more about what we're doing specifically in Kalispell and Montana. Anyone here who gets our email alerts can attest. They're pretty cool. They're exciting. We're not just sending out the usual, pretty boring. They're very innovative. They're talking about initiatives, which I'll segue like this, where we launched a nationwide Latino Liberty Coalition. We had 120 bilingual leaders going into their communities and colleges speaking about free markets and capitalism, the first of its kind, the conservative movement. Really exciting things that we're doing. And I'd love to share those with you, with everyone in this audience. So if you want to fill out that card and give it to me, we'd love to add you to our mail list, and that also has opportunities to support our organization as well.
We can donate on your website? On
our website, but it takes 5% on the website. So yeah, direct is easier, but if you want to do it on the website, by all means. So,
do you have anything to say about Obamacare?
Did anybody hear the radio segment this morning? No? Yeah, it was fun. Obamacare is a very passionate issue of mine. If anyone says it's a good thing, I will disagree with you. Let me just put it that way.
So, tell them what your host said this morning.
I'll let him tell the story. I don't want to. There's friends of friends in a town.
It would take too much time. Questions?
Now, Charlie, you mentioned 700 campuses. Can you tell us the breakdown between public institutions and private institutions? Are they similar or are they different?
Sure.
Why?
He asked the breakdown between private institutions and public institutions. So if we went by percentage, it would be more public because there are more public schools that we reach in our communities. We have a lot of community colleges. I will say this, I would say it's about 60% public, 40% private. However, we have never gotten kicked off a public campus, ever. I mean, we will go with a poster and a banner doing protests that say big government sucks at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is a really conservative school, right? And we won't get kicked off. We've gotten kicked off a lot of private schools that are even Christian private schools, Texas Women College. And I'll tell you what, and this is a very passionate issue of mine, especially amongst many other of the Christian community. They are very, they don't want political dialogue in their schools. Not all, mind you, not all, but we've gotten kicked off of many Christian-based schools because they're like, we don't want to take a stance either way. We get you have a passion for it, and we're in a lawsuit right now with a school in Palm Beach called Broward College. I'm not sure if they're faith-based or not, but if you go to our website, you can see the video. Our staff member, which we had activists in a chapter at, we got kicked off because, get this, we weren't in the free speech zone. Right. Free speech zone. Free speech has now become a geographical location on college campuses, which to me baffles me. We're filing a lawsuit against them. I mean, it's a bunch of balderdash, if you ask me, and we need to fight that. So it breaks down, but the public schools, they've never kicked us off, which they really don't have a right to, or they just don't, which is an interesting thing. So.
Sir, you talked about those older skeptical Republicans. At the beginning, they let you go. Do you see people now that you have following coming around and saying, hey, Charlie, how about we do this together because there is an interest? And how do you position yourself in the movement now?
Sure. We work with all organizations, many different party apparatuses. We're a 501c3. So we have to be careful not to work with anything too outwardly political. But even with that being said, our tactics and our messaging doesn't always excite a lot of party leaders. I've gotten in a lot of fights with people like Reince Priebus before. I'll let you draw your own conclusions of that one. But the RNC has their own belief system that sometimes runs counter to a true grassroots model. That's what I will say. Not all people. There have been some changes made. There have been. And some good people that have gotten in there since 2012, especially since 2008. But there's still a old guard belief that is not embracing of innovative, unique grassroots tactics, and I see a lot of heads nodding, and I'll let you fill in the spaces there. And I'm not going to land blast anyone, but you can figure that out yourself.
Question.
Hi. First of all, thanks so much for being here. And when I'm talking to younger people, the social issues come up a lot.
Sure.
What are your experiences
Yeah.
with that?
So I'm an unapologetic social conservative. Growing up in Chicago, that's not an easy thing to be. Being pro-life and pro-marriage, all that good stuff. However, if you listen closely to what our organization stands for, we stand for free markets, limited government, fiscal responsibility. We took a poll at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. We did this back in 2012 because I really wanted to get a snapshot of what the conservative youth were feeling. 70% of young people at the Conservative Political Action Conference that self-described as conservative supported same-sex marriage. 70%. Now, I'm always going to support, one man, one woman. However, I'm very tactical in the way I fight. And I know that if I'm on a college campus and I want to even engage a young person in a conversation about conservative values, I know what the first thing I should talk about, and that's the pocketbook and that's the overreach of government. And I have turned an amazing amount of fiscal conservatives into social conservatives by engaging them in that kind of conversation. But if we don't start that dialogue and we don't start that conversation, we've lost the war before it even begins. And I think that's a very important thing we need to learn about, but that doesn't mean we need to drop the social agenda. And look, the best kind of change is targeted change. We're fighting for my generation to have a more free and prosperous future. We can't take on every single issue. We keep it very centered for a reason, because we think that these are issues that we can rally behind. And many of you can agree, the death of many organizations is taking on way too many fights. And we know that we're going to stick with what works, and we're not going to vary from that.
Yeah, I'm just considering that Hillary's plan for forgiving student loans for getting the young people's vote, and I'm wondering, your motto, "Big government sucks," and what it conceptualizes: dignity, self-respect, self-reliance. You signed up for it, you pay for it. That obviously is the antidote to Hillary's dangling that $35,000 loan forgiveness in front of the in front of our opposition. But I'm wondering, I'm glad to hear in your answer to the previous question that you're tactical in your approach. But I'm just wondering, do you have a strategy for how do you offset a $35,000 loan forgiveness?
And it's tough because they made it tough. And I'll say it again, I want everyone in the country to know this, and I've said it on national TV. And at first Neil Cavuto thought I was nuts, and the fourth time I said it, he finally agreed to me. I said, the student loan crisis is by design. This is not a mistake. They wanted kids to get into debt. Start to think that way. They wanted this to be a tough issue for us to combat. The way we have to fight it is one with freedom and liberty, and it's tough to do that in a soundbite. We also need a policy-specific answer to student loan forgiveness. I've come up with ideas of my own that I hope people would embrace. It's very simple. We need to start getting the federal government out of the student loan business. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a senior in high school, thinking of where I wanted to go to college, I got a daily call and 2 emails from a PERSA from FAFSA. Who knows what FAFSA is? If you have a kid in college, you'll know. It is the federal student loan enforcement. Essentially, they want kids to sign up for as many student loans as possible. I kid you not, I have some of their voicemails, and I compared the voicemails of that from mortgage house lenders in 2004. It seems like they're using the same script. Hey, Charlie, I'd love to call you about a really exciting opportunity. You can get to college for a really affordable rate. You can pursue your dreams. You can do everything you want to do and get a great job once you graduate. All you got to do is fill out your federal student loan form. Call me back at 800. I kid you not. Does that not like sound what the 2008 financial crisis was built around? And I'll say this, it's a tough, tough battle. Some of the ideas that I have is the federal government, first step, should never give more than $10,000 a year in a student loan than a kid. Cap it at $10,000, it's the first step. We are giving like $50,000 a year to some of these kids, subsidized through the federal government. Cheap money, cheap credit that just goes, and I'll tell you what, it doesn't all go to tuition. It goes towards a thing called a lifestyle loan. I kid you not. It's a lifestyle loan. Well, the kid needs to have an Apple computer, right? And he's got to live in a nice apartment, and he's got to get to school and back, and he's got to be able to eat, right? And if he's not eating at the dorm, they call it a lifestyle loan. So it'd be one thing if it all went to tuition. It's not. And it's a very complex policy-specific argument, but I want to get the wheels turning in this audience and kind of put you on the alert with this so that you're not taken off guard when Hillary takes the stage 9 months from now, and that's one of her 4 pillars. We have to be ready, and we have to demand the best messaging people, Arthur Brooks and Ben Carson, and people that are really, really smart to be able to combat that. So just wanted to put that out there. So.
Charlie, just to let you know, we have several people here that are younger than you are.
I'm getting way too old for this.
I want to alert them to start thinking about the question they have. We'll get back to you guys later. But, we have a question over here.
Charlie, you're so articulate and a real researcher and think for yourself. You were going through the school system, the education system, during the decline. And I'm amazed that you survived it, and I was wondering how and why. Where did you get? Was it self-motivation? Was it your parents? Or how did you compensate for the lack of real education?
Sure. Well, growing up in the Chicago public school system, not actually the CPS, I'll correct that. It was part of the family of Chicago schools in a suburban school. But it's still the same teachers, the Illinois unions, all that kind of stuff. Whenever I disagreed with a teacher, like if my economics teacher would go up to the front of the classroom and write "profit is evil," I would get kicked out to the hall. I'm not kidding. Like, I spent a lot of time in the hall. I wore it as a badge of honor, right? My learning, for a large part, was very autodidactic, self-taught. I read a lot, I listen a lot, I learn from other people, I spend a lot of time with people that are much, much smarter than I am. And I try to absorb like a sponge, and I've read every Federalist paper. I read the Declaration of Independence and Constitution once a week. I've read Free to Choose, and I've also read the books of the left. And I try to get as much information as I possibly can. And when you have a passion for something, it's really easy to learn it and absorb it. And I have a true, true passion. I don't learn chemistry the same way. I wish I did. It doesn't come with the same kind of absorption. Go ahead.
Do you inspire that self-motivation in others? Or does
we have already. I'll tell you, and I encourage, if you got a flyer, please look at some of the faces that we have. These were kids, and I kid you not, we have tens of thousands of young leaders that had the same kind of inkling that I did, that now have been catalyzed into action, and now have been given a direction, a sense of optimism. Because I truly believe, and I'm sure you all have young people in your life that want to see this country go in the right direction, and they want to see things, they're just not given a way to express that. And we give them that. And that is why we're doing what we're doing. Because I think to myself, right? I think to myself, being a senior in high school, asking the Heritage Foundation for materials and asking the Illinois Republican Party for support and getting nothing. I remember that. And that's why we exist, to change it. That's why if you see a booklet called Capitalism Cures, on you might have got one, you might have not. Any high school kid in the country that wants one, we'll send 100 free copies. We don't care, we just send it. And we know that that could be the difference maker in a kid's life, being able to articulate free markets in a classroom environment. So to answer that question, that is the fight that we are fighting, and we do so unapologetically. I'll never forget being alone in a high school environment, and that disease of loneliness is unfortunately widespread amongst conservatives, and liberals want it to be that way. They want to ostracize us and divide us and make us think that we're alone, and we're not.
Charlie, does your future hold any political aspirations?
Take the fifth like Lois Lerner. That's my answer. I'm not kidding. Like, no, I mean, a lot of people want me to run for office. A lot of people have said, "Hey, Charlie, can I donate to your super PAC?" I'm like, I don't have a super PAC. Like, I am humbled and gracious for people to even say that. If one day my future holds that, then I will embrace it with the same energy and enthusiasm and vigor and innovation and that I take with Turning Point USA. And if that is in my future, then God will tell me that. And I just kind of go the way that He compels me to go. And right now, that's not on the horizon. Right now, I feel more than compelled to continue on this path.
Charlie, it's dawned on me, and I'm sure it's dawned on you, that the powers that be don't like you.
Oh, no.
And you are a 501c3, as you've stated several times tonight. And I know in the churches, the 501c3 churches don't have the liberty anymore to talk about homosexual marriage or to talk about lesbianism or to talk about abortion or to talk about much of anything when it comes right down to it. And they're making lists in Houston, Texas right now of the preachers who are speaking out and asking for their sermons. The city council, I think, has backed down on that at this point, but in any case, what's to keep the IRS from coming after you with your 501c3 status and threatening and changing your vocabulary?
I hate to say it, they already have. And it happened previously under the lowest learner exemption regime. And not to scare you from not giving, we're well past that point, thankfully. We were in purgatory. We were not given a declaration of judgment, and we filed for our 501c3 papers, and we waited month after month after month and asked questions, and thankfully we weren't asked the same type of intrusive questions that many others would, but we were put in a pool of applicants that was a threat to the administration. I will tell you what, I've traveled the country and met with groups like this. I will believe that a contributing factor to the loss of Mitt Romney in 2012 was the weaponization of the IRS, and I can prove it. There was no greater bombshell that tore apart the grassroots Tea Party movement than the IRS going into the lives and pulling apart the grassroots one at a time. I could go to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho as an example, not too far from here, right? There was a wonderful Tea Party group of 300 members. They would meet every week and make phone calls and knock on doors. They even helped get Scott Brown elected in Massachusetts when Obamacare was essentially on the referendum. They made 30,000 phone calls, collectively. And when time came for the IRS judgment, they started asking questions like, what were in your prayers? Can we have all of your emails ever since you've started an organization? What are your board of directors' religious beliefs? Tell us every phone call you've ever made as a member. And surely, solely, these board of directors made, I think, a good decision in judgment. They said, you know, I love my family too much to put myself through 3 years of forensic audits. And slowly the group died and withered into nothing. And that happened all across the country. I can tell you from Kansas City to Little Rock, Arkansas, I have seen Tea Parties disappear because of the IRS. And do not minimize the criminality of this weapon that has been used by this administration. And people say all the time, Benghazi, which is great, and it should be, but I told you this at dinner, the thing that gets me going is the blatant criminality, the deletion of emails. Are you kidding me? If this was not the Soviet Union, tell me what is. I mean, this was like in the Soviet Union after it rains for 3 straight months and they say, well, I'm sorry, my fellow comrades, we've had another famine. It is the same thing that the IRS said when they deleted the emails. And that's what we have to start saying. They didn't lose the emails, they deleted the emails. So that's a way we can win over the messaging. And unfortunately, the members of Congress, like John Boehner, he will say, well, they didn't lose anything, they deleted them. And they destroyed them. And I'm sorry, this is a long-winded answer. You hit a nerve. It is something I think every American, whether it's Republican or Democrat, should be extremely passionate about. And the IRS is the only arm of government that knows pretty much everything about us. They know every transaction that we pretty much make. They know where we spend our money. They know things that no other weapon of government that would only the NSA would know. And since the new developments show there is collusion in between different departments, if we don't get the Senate back and we don't start holding criminal prosecution hearings for the people around Lois Lerner, this is going to continue.
Back to the task that you're doing. There's 11 institutions in Montana. One of them is right here at Flathead Valley Community College. It has a larger demographic than just young folks because there's a lot of folks that are going back for trades. What's your plan up there, and what can we do in this room, those of us living in Flathead, to help you be successful there?
Absolutely. So part of our plan is to get one staff member for the entire state of Montana. Someone that is a Turning Point USA field representative with one stated goal for the calendar year of 2015, to get a vibrant, active, bold Turning Point USA chapter on every single campus in Montana. That will be that individual's goal, and we want to get them starting January 5th of 2015. And the model will be very simple. Replicate our success in other states. In Illinois, there are 95 colleges, and we have 87 chapters in Illinois. We have an unbelievable track record of success, and it's because we can relate, we can identify, we can mobilize, and we can organize. And people say, where'd you learn all this? And I said, I read The Audacity to Win by David Plouffe, who was the campaign manager of Barack Obama. I've attended MoveOn.org community organizing sessions. They do it better than us. Let's learn it and let's replicate it, and we are. So that is our vision for Montana. And it goes outside of just the Flathead Valley Community College. It goes into schools like University of Montana and Carroll College, and it goes into all the community colleges across the state. And we have an advantage here in Montana. 3 big advantages. Number 1, there aren't that many schools. Number 2, a majority of kids that do attend school have an inkling towards conservative beliefs, whether or not they grew up in a church environment or they grew up to respect a gun and the Second Amendment. Most of them, not all of them, will believe in our value system. The third that really of an opportunity is that there isn't much happening on these campuses that is of a conservative bent. There are some great college Republican chapters that do a great job. We work with Stephen Rowe at Montana State University and David Ricci. I don't know if anyone knows them in this room. They're great kids, but we need to prop them up and find more of them and multiply their effect. And that is what we have planned here. And in the back, there's a binder that is the Montana 2015 Spring Field Plan. I only have 30 of them because I was told there would be 10 of you tonight. I figured I'd be safe. Couples, please take one. If you're interested in seeing a little bit more specific, it's a 30-page detailed proposal of what we've done, what we plan to do. There's even a budget in there. It's a list of schools, everything that we want to do, and we're very transparent. My salary is $100 a month. I know, it's amazing that amount, how high it is. Pays for my expenses. We have 21 people on staff right now nationally, and what we've done in Illinois, and Wisconsin, Texas, and Florida, we'd love to bring here to this beautiful, beautiful state. So.
Today, a judge threw out the lawsuit against the IRS on their 501Cs. He said there was no harm done because they quit harassing people.
Yeah, well, so no harm done, sure. Okay, like there was no harm done to the Titanic, right? It was all in place. It's wrong. I mean, it is a string, and this is another thing I can talk about for hours. It's a string of activist judges that have been put in by this president. And that is the thing that just goes glossed over in the long litany of unfortunate, as he likes to say, accomplishments, as I like to call destructive actions by this president, is he has filled the bench with these activist left-wing socialist judges that are nothing but puppets of this administration that will do whatever they want, whether it's throwing out state sovereignty and same-sex marriage laws, whether it's declaring the IRS, the 501c4s, no harm done. I didn't hear about that specific ruling, but these activist judges on the federal level and also now on the state level and on the circuit court level are now dictating our laws. They're not writing them. They are becoming activist interpretation. Even beyond interpreting the law, they are now becoming enforcement. And that is a scary, scary road. And if you look at constitutional law and what John Marshall, thought of, we never ever designed the Supreme Court to become an enforcement mechanism, and it has. And we have to push back against that. I know it seems like we got a lot on our plate, and we do, but it's something everyone should be well aware of, because we think, we believe that the problem is at the White House, and it is, but he has hundreds of thousands of his own bureaucrats that are there to stay, and all these agencies, and thousands of lawyers, and now judges that will be continually malinterpreting and enforcing laws against us for the next 20 or 30 years. And that's the importance of winning the White House in 2016. So we can put a stop to that, remove them, and kind of backtrack a little bit.
Do you get any funding from the GOP nationally?
Do I get funding from the GOP nationally? No, not directly. However, I will say this. Many of the biggest supporters of the GOP are extremely enthusiastic and excited about what we're doing. People of high dollar figure amounts that I will not name, but people that give the GOP tons of money, I have found through connections and just asking for introductions, and I show them and they say this, and I quote, "You're actually doing something." And they support it enthusiastically. So not directly, but many of the people that have supported and continue to support the GOP have gotten on board.
Did they give you any kind of moral support?
No.
You just wait till they call my house.
Back to this person that we need to be going to all of our colleges.
Sure.
In 15. What kind of money do we need to raise to support that?
Sure. To be transparent with you all, our statewide budget for 2015 is, I think, $67,000. I might be off a couple. You can look in the back. That's a complete statewide budget. Compared to our Ohio plan is like $900,000 compared to that. We're very frugal. We print things in-house. We're able to be very trim. We are already opened up job interviews to find someone for Montana, and we've been screening applicants, haven't found anyone crazy. Another side note, if you have any young person between the age of 18 or 24 looking for a job, please have them contact me. But they would be earning a salary of $2,400 a month. and we'd cover all expenses and gas. So it's not a ton of money, but it's enough for them to live and enough for them to do a nice job. So, and if anyone needs a line-by-line budget of what it would be in Montana for 2015, please, by all means, we'll give you our books. We'll give it to you. We're very compliant with that, and the budget is in there in the back, and we'd love to share that with you. So.
Charlie, would you say one of the big diseases that's confronting us, aside from Ebola?
Ebola?
Yeah, would it be apathy?
Yes. The disease of apathy is widespread, and it's not just amongst young people. How many people over the age of 40 do you encounter that have just given up on America or given up on voting? Millions. And now, I still don't know exactly the metrics behind this, but I was fascinated to believe this. I believe in order for us to win the President of the United States, we need to have a three-tiered conservative: national security, a social, and a fiscal conservative, all three together. I didn't know this, but did you know that in 2004, George Bush got more votes in Ohio than Barack Obama did in 2012? I was fascinated by that. And the reason I say that is that conservatives weren't very apathetic back in 2004 and 2000. Because we were under a direct threat internationally, and we've since lost that. Who remembers after 9/11? We came together as a country, there was this belief together. I remember I was in 2nd grade when 9/11 happened. I mean, I know, and I...
Thanks a lot.
I know. I mean, yeah. So, and I remember even at that age that we came together as a country and there was a sense of urgency and responsibility that I never experienced since then. And since then we've seen just a decline and a descent into apathy, and we have to break that pattern. And the way we do it with young people is make it relevant, make it relatable, and we have to do more of that. So, and then, is there another question?
Yeah.
Cool.
I forgot. I was so into listening to what you
there is one thing I want to mention that I totally forgot that I usually incorporate.
You're on.
All right. So I've made a lot of enemies at the GOP over this. So I gave a speech about 9 months ago because I got asked a question. Who would you want to see run in 2016? Who would you want to do? Who would you want to see as our figurehead? And so I gave a little bit different of an answer. And I said, well, I can tell you what we shouldn't do. I said, we shouldn't run a candidate then when he is asked, what are your favorite sports teams? He responds, well, a lot of my friends own some sports teams. That's not a candidate we should run. Mitt Romney would have been a wonderful president. He would have fought ISIS with authority. I think he would have governed with honor and integrity, and he would have cleaned up a lot of these rascals of Washington, D.C. He was a subpar candidate. We have to admit that to ourselves. And he was a very poor candidate messaging to young people. Very, very bad. And I like to say Mitt Romney's like the guy in the picture frame you buy in Target when you buy a picture frame. Like, if you buy that's who he is, right? Just that perfect photogenic smile. Look, I think he's a very honorable man. I supported him in the primary. I thought he was actually the best choice out of what we had. And I made a lot of enemies through that too, and you can disagree with that. I was 18. You can disagree with it. But I will say this. I have a test, and this is what made me a lot of enemies. I said we have come into a culture where presidential politics has become a personality test. It is now American Idol. It is no longer who's better on the issues, but who is better on the camera. More people will watch Sunday NFL Countdown than Meet the Press on Sunday morning. So if we don't run a personality that is vibrant, that is charismatic and magnetic, we will lose presidential elections. So I have a very, very simple test that I give to any prospective 2016 nominee. I can privately or publicly tell you how every single one of them has done on my test. I've given it to all of them. And it's 3 very, very simple questions. Very simple. Is LeBron James still playing basketball? Is Derek Jeter still playing basketball? And how many Hunger Games movies are there? Very simple. If you can't answer those 3 questions, you shouldn't be the next GOP nominee. I kid you not. There were kids that I talked to on college campuses that said, why should I vote for a guy running for office that never goes on Comedy Central, never goes on David Letterman, never goes on Jay Leno, doesn't know the difference between Twitter or Facebook or Vine or Instagram or Netflix or any of these things. We have to be able to message. Now look, I know that you realize that the issues and the policy, I believe, that's my passion. But on presidential politics, we have descended into an American Idol culture. And we have to run the flashiest, best person that we have, and all the other stuff is just fighting on the margins. And midterms matter about issues. Presidential elections matter about people. We have to realize people vote for people. They don't vote for policies.
So that should eliminate Hillary right there, though.
Yeah. You would think so. I would agree with you. And if we run a good charismatic candidate, I would agree. So there's an opportunity there. Yeah.
Can you hear me? I just have one question. When you're talking about apathy, does anybody ever ask every time that they vote for an issue, it gets knocked down by some court judge? Anybody ask, you know, why you could go to the polls and you vote, and then when you vote for something,
You mean like ballot referendums or?
immigration, whatever.
Okay. I don't hear as much about that. To go to my previous comment, there is a string of activist judges that are striking things down. I do hear a lot of this, though, and I want to challenge everyone in this room to take a firm stand. Earlier today, a gentleman said, well, we have a do-nothing Congress that does nothing, and we have to push back against that. We have a do-nothing Senate, and a Harry Reid who refuses to put up the 380 jobs bills on the floor. Believe it or not, if he put those onto the floor in the Senate, they would pass with bipartisan support. Things like middle-class tax cuts, small business tax exemptions, Keystone pipeline approval, all these sorts of things. Why is Harry Reid doing it? He's protecting the president. He knows that even if it goes to the Senate, the president will have to put his name to something, which means he has to take responsibility, which means he has to go off the golf course, which he really doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to make that phone call. So, I mean, that's kind of what's going on there. So we have to start to say we don't have a do-nothing Congress. We have a do-nothing Senate run by Harry Reid. So.
Question?
I just want to know, how do you keep Republicans from fighting Republicans?
Oh, what a great issue. What a great question. How do we fight Republicans from fighting Republicans? I believe there is a time for purification to get people that should be on the other side out of the party, but there's also a time for unification. And we have to realize when that time is. And we have to realize that, at least in Illinois, and I don't think this is in Montana, we have Democrats that pretend they're Republicans. I mean, like,
We have that here.
oh yeah. I mean, and I don't say that, like, they're not rhinos, like, they're not even well-intentioned. Like, they are actually card-carrying Democrats. I mean, the head of the Chicago Republican Party, there was one, believe it or not, was the former Speaker of the House of the Democratic Party's personal aide. He was a card-carrying Democrat. So to stop infighting, you first have to purify, which is important. But also the unification. How do we get Republicans to stop fighting Republicans? And it really comes really simple. We have to start winning. And if we start winning, all of a sudden these battles would just start to ease. You notice that the left hasn't had any huge fights in the last 6 years. They're about to. They're about to rip each other's heads off, and it's going to be really fun to watch. But in the last 6 years, they had primary fights, and there's some people that break ranks, but for the most part, the Democrats haven't spent near the amount of resources on primaries that we have. And it's just, we as Republicans also want the best candidate to run, whereas the Democrats, they just want someone they can, follow into oblivion. So there's a difference there.
Any questions from the young people? Are you concerned about the $17.6 trillion
I am.
we're handing?
Saying student loan debt was forgiven. What kind of percentage compared to the national debt is that?
Yeah, sure. So they wouldn't do a blanket student loan forgiveness, but Elizabeth Warren wants to. So if you add up all the student loans in the country, it's like $1.1 trillion. We have a $17.6 trillion debt. So the privately held student loan debt is $1.1 trillion. The privately held credit card debt is $900 billion. I mean, student loan debt is more than privately held credit card debt. It is that big of a problem, and it's growing every single year. And if you have a young person in your life, really encourage them to go to local community college first, or maybe work a couple years before they go to college, or get some things underneath their belt. I've made more enemies by saying this, and I say we have too many kids going to college. I mean, four-year college. I mean, I'll tell you, and I have so many friends in high school, and I'm really getting to that age where kids are in juniors in college, where they're just dropping out. They're dropping like flies. And then why should they have been there in the first place? And it's a great question, and it's something that we have to realize the magnitude of what we're dealing with. That if we bailed out student loan, and I don't think that's what they would do initially, it would be a step and it would be a phase-in. I mean, it would be an equivalent of like 1/5 of the American economy consumer spending for a year. It is huge how much money it is. So just the ripple effects of that would be awful. I mean, it would negatively harm everyone if they did that. It would create, as we like to call, a moral hazard. Remember that thing in 2008 that everyone talked about? And people that actually did things the right way and worked their way through college, we would just call them Ford Motor Company because they never took a bailout.
Charlie,
Second question.
Oh.
on the student loan, are the kids in the colleges What are those loans hanging over their head? Does that bother those kids?
Sure.
Because when I first heard about those, I couldn't believe it. I knew a young man that was going to get married, and they each had, this was years ago, $20,000 and $30,000. And how do you start a marriage with $50,000 debt?
Precisely.
So does that change their thinking?
So her question, just to repeat to the other side of the room, is these kids that have $20,000, $30,000 in student loan debt, does that change their thinking at all? And unfortunately, the answer to that question is no. But there is an element there that we can win over, and there is an element that we can, communicate to. But I will say this, that the reason why we're seeing the lowest rates of American entrepreneurship in the history of America is because of the student loan crisis. It's kids that want to start businesses, want to do something, that are just, they're in shackles. They just can't. They have not near enough credit to even, think about starting a business or even taking a risk, because they're already $30,000 in the hole. Or I know a kid that went to Brown University in Rhode Island. Yeah, Brown University in Rhode Island, super left-leaning school. The kid's a liberal, and you'll see why in a second. He studied children's storytelling, was his major. Children's storytelling, $180,000 in student loan debt. And here he is on Facebook messaging me. He's like, "Hey Charlie, why can't I pay this off? This is kind of crazy." I mean, come on, you studied children's storytelling, man. I mean, $180,000. So even if they're getting degrees, 30% of all degrees in this country are in soft social sciences, history, psychology, and those don't reciprocate in value to have high-paying jobs, which is another way I have reformed the student loan industry. I said, why don't we act like we are actually a bank, so we have a good, if you're going to study engineering, we'll give you a loan, because you're probably going to be able to find a job and you're going to do something. If you're going to study a trade, we'll give you a loan. If you're going to study Western medieval history, let's have a conversation about that. Let's make sure you're actually going to be able to find a job and not become a barista. So.
How do we make the federal debt a real threat to students?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like anybody really cares that $131,000.
Yeah, he said, how do we make the national debt relevant and make people care? It's something that originally got me sparked into politics. I remember looking at the national debt when I first got involved in politics. The national debt was all of $9 trillion, and now it's $17 trillion. The generational theft and the egregious financial assault in my generation is criminal. How do we make people care? It's very tough. It's a very esoteric concept that you just can't boil down. We did launch the first ever student debt clock on our website, so a lot of people here, I'm sure, watch Fox News, and they'll pop up on Fox News how much everyone's share of the national debt is. I'm sure you've heard it's like $70,000 or $111,000, and I always saw those figures, and I knew there was something wrong with them. I just said, this is not right. This was way, whoever came up with that number did not do enough homework. So I sat down and I remember like, I know what's wrong with that number. So I got to work and I got some of my math buddies together, and I came to a very, very easy to understand conclusion. They're just taking the population divided by the national debt. Now what's wrong with that conclusion? Well, we are going to be living longer, young people, so our share of the national debt is actually much bigger than some people in this room, right? Because we are going to have to pay it off for much longer, so the burden is proportionally much larger on us. So we said, let's figure it out in an actuarial sense and break it into segments of the population of how long life expectancy is, divide it everything, and the average student share of the national debt is over $913,000. And that's the number they should use on Fox News, because that is true generational theft. Because $111,000, it sounds really bad, and they say, oh, a new baby today now has $90,000 in debt. Well, no, it's actually more like $1.9 million, because that baby, believe it or not, has 21 years less on me. So we calculated it for when I was 19. And so the kid born today has 1.3 million. I have 917. That's the way we need to start making these arguments, because then it gets formed a generational component to it, which usually isn't calculated into the argument. People just do that simple math, and we need to push back against that. Yeah.
There's a student down in Missoula that I would like your opinion on this. He's got a thing for student loan repayment, and what he wants to do is he wants to get taken out of his paycheck and have it proportional to the paycheck, and then have that being started to pay back instead of a lump sum that is going to be a whole lot more than what they're going to be able to pay out of whatever it is they're making.
Yeah, so just to repeat the question, she said, what about a proportion of the paycheck payoff plan?
Yeah, so it would come out like your income tax
Sure.
goes out, and then it would be paid back.
Yeah, there's a couple reasons why I'm not crazy about that proposal. The first of which is if you can find a job as a young person, that'd be great. It's not easy to find a good paying job to even put a dent into that debt. It's a step in the right direction. However, you start to get down a road, as I like to say, away from self-reliance, and we're starting to almost going to turn it into a student loan tax. We're going to start taking it out of your paycheck, and I think we need to get away from that. We shouldn't tell young people you have to start paying these out, just like you have to start paying into Social Security even though it's not going to be there. And you could start to, I'm not kidding, what if, there are Democratic politicians that are proposing a student loan tax where people under the age of 30 will be forced to contribute to a student loan bailout fund as part of their paycheck, like a payroll tax, like FICA. We should get away from that idea. Now, whether it's through government, no. If it's through a private sector, that's great. If it's through like a group or where you could sign up with and they automatically take it out of your paycheck, and it's all voluntary, I think that's a great program, because that would be something that would make more responsibility. But the idea that the government should like create the student loan bailout fund on the backs of young people, I think that's a bunch of nonsense. So.
One more question.
Young man right there.
Call it quits.
So when will we start seeing major consequences from the national debt?
Unfortunately, we already have. The question was, when are we going to start seeing major consequences from the national debt? One of the reasons why China can push us around the way they are, and they're pretty much doing whatever they want, is because we owe over $1 trillion to them. There's a lot of negative consequences with the national debt. I could go through the policy elements, by and large, and I always say borrowing today is taxation tomorrow. The easiest way to destroy a country is by indebting it. It's every civilization that ever got in trouble, not everyone, but a majority of them just started living outside their means, whether it's the Roman Empire, whether it was ancient China, it was just living outside of their means, and then in return, what they start to do? They start to devalue their currency and printing lots of money. Luckily, we don't do that in this country. Right, sure. When are we going to start seeing the negative side effects? Some economists say in the next 2 years. Others say in 20, others say in 10. I couldn't put a finger on it, but I say that we are on the precipice of having a cataclysmic collision financially, whether it's internationally, whether it's through leveraging, whether it's through a superpower negotiation where these countries that hold our bonds say, what are you going to do about it if we start defaulting on your loans? Or if we start to come and we want reciprocation. Right now, the federal debt, and I might be estimating, is 13 to 17% in interest. At current levels, in 10 years, it will take over 30% of the federal budget in just interest payments. So these big government liberals that love education and love the environment and they want to help every people, how can you help someone if $1 out of $3 that a third of every dollar that you spend is just going to interest? It's just going to interest. So to answer your question, the negative side effects of our overspending, we're already starting to see the consequences of it. We are going to see it even more in the next 4 years. And unfortunately for you and me, we're going to see it for the rest of our lives. And that's one of the scariest things ever, because to think back in 1998, we had a balanced budget and a surplus. And to think, just a couple years ago we were borrowing $1 trillion and now we're borrowing $500 million, and we consider that an accomplishment. I think that we need to seriously reconsider our priorities. So.
Have we met a visionary tonight?
Can I close it up?
We're going to wrap it up and we're done.
I'll wrap it up. Please give me your email card and sign up for our alerts. If you're in the position to do so, we would welcome any kind of generosity to help support our efforts here in Montana. Every single dollar raised here tonight will go directly to our expansive and innovative grassroots program here in Montana to engage, empower, mobilize, and organize young Montanans around free markets and limited government. Please, if you have a young person in your life that wants to get involved and wants to make a difference, we have an amazing amount of opportunities to do so. Every young person in the audience today, please come and see me. We would love to get you plugged into our networks already existing here and get you into leadership in our organization. Our generation is one that can be won over by these values. We can do it. We need to do it. The 1 million young people turn 18 every single month. The fastest growing generation in the history of America. And let's not allow the left to lay claim over them. Thank you so much.